On Francis' deathbed, he asked to be placed, well, not really deathbed, because he was asked to be placed naked on the naked ground. But he said to the brothers who were present, he said, "The Lord has taught me what I was to do. May the Lord teach you what you are to do." And we recognize that each of us is going to follow Christ in our own unique way according to the gifts and graces God gives us. And so we ought to expect that people don't follow us, certainly don't follow me, follow Christ. And we follow Christ because Christ is our inspiration. Now, in a gospel reading, we can always look at it, what we have to do. We have to prepare ourselves. But, Jesus is the bridegroom, has brought the wedding banquet to humanity. And of course, the people weren't really prepared for this because they had a misconception of the Messiah, the Christ. But Jesus, one of the challenges he has is to help people to let go of this misunderstanding of the true Messiah. And he will show them the true Messiah, especially when he's on the cross. This is the great wedding banquet. This is the hour of Jesus' glorification where he will reveal who God is, who the true Messiah and the Christ is. And then Jesus says in the scriptures, "I've come to serve and not to be served." He obviously had the gift to be able to forgive sins and to heal people. And so he put that into action. He also fed people as well, cast out demons. But he did have people serving him. But nonetheless, he uses his gifts to serve other people for the benefit of other people, not for his own selfish gain. And so God continues to serve us within our hearts. Now, in the last part, of the gospel reading, there's a thief that could come, and the thief is actually the Christ. The Christ has come to steal our hearts, to win our hearts, because we are always attracted by love, because we were created out of love, we are sustained by love, and one day we will meet love, we will meet God face to face. Now, in the first reading for the book of wisdom, it's interesting. We have the destruction of enemies, and we also have the punishing our enemies. Now, sometimes we think of a certain group of people or a certain person that's the enemy, and really the enemy for God is sin. And so and remember, sin comes from within. God is within, but sin also comes from within. Somebody can insult me one day and I just kind of let it go. And the next day, maybe I yell and scream at that person. Maybe I kick them in the shins. My right shin is really hurting right now, so please don't kick me in the shin. But and that's the enemy. And so let us not all, we're all a mix. We all have mixed motives, and this is the reality of being human. But I always draw from Romans 3:23-24. For we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. We have blocked God's love, the flow of God's love. We block it, and we fall short. But we are all justified through the redemption brought by Christ Jesus. Jesus Christ is the one that justifies us. And so let us not try to think we can justify ourselves. Let us allow Christ to justify us. Let us humble ourselves to allow Christ to do this for us. And then we can also be inspired by our second reading, the letter to the Hebrews. Abraham and Sarah, they received their call late in life. And so did Moses, actually. And so sometimes you wonder, is my certain family member going to come to faith? They're going to listen to the call of God? God calls at different times, And Moses, Abraham, and Sarah were quite old when they received their call. But, Abraham and Sarah, they had no idea where they're going. And even when they're in the promised land, they're still living in tents. They don't realize they're in the promised land and that they trust. And then when Abraham is about to offer Isaac, it's simply because he has come to know who God is. In other words, he can trust the God who is asking him to do this. And obviously God will not ask Abraham to do this, but we can always refresh ourselves and be reminded of the crucified Christ, where and Jesus in John's gospel doesn't call it crucifixion. He calls it glorification, because he's going to reveal who God is to all of humanity through his cross. I mean, that's why we have crucifixes all over the place, is to remind us that this is who truly God is. And this is who we truly are, because God dwells within us. So we are more than Dan, Sheila, Fred. We are who we are with God. And this, we are awakened to this every time we come to Eucharist, as we receive the body and blood of Christ, so that we can allow Christ to serve within us, so that we can be strengthened, we can be encouraged to serve one another out of love and God's goodness.